Yeah.
Anytime.
We are here today on Tuesday, August 13th, 2013, with Althea Lee to discuss the March on Washington from August 28th, 1963, her events up to the day of, afterwards, anything she would like to talk about.
Well, I think the impact of the March on Washington never left me. And I think for the last 50 years, oh my God, 50 years, it has really embedded itself in me and made me a better person. The reason being, the march was not a black thing and it was not a white thing. It was a people thing. And as I was telling Travis earlier, it was the first time seeing Native Americans in their national dress and making a declaration of who they were, and the same for all the other nationalities. We grew up in a very open environment where we even had a Chinese student in our house, and we all attended together. And from the moment you got off the train, you felt that you were part of something very special.
So tell me about the trip then. Let's just talk about logistics first. So you were leaving from?
We left New York at around 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. We arrived there at around 10 o'clock. When we got to Union Station, we were surrounded by men from the Nation of Islam who came to protect us because it was alleged that there would be trouble. And I think that if a mosquito was in the midst, he would leave.
Actually, back up beforehand. So before even the train ride, what was your thoughts of it? Did you think ahead of time, before, like, was there anything you could even imagine, or you just like say, let's have some fun?
No, you couldn't imagine it. But I had the pleasure of working with Baird Rustin. My mom was a shop steward with District 65 Union. And she called me one day and she says, I want you to go down to the Union Hall. There's a guy down there organizing a march, But we thought it was just, if you notice, the button says jobs and freedom. And the emphasis was that all people would be recognized for their value, not because they were black or white or green. And so the union emphasis was that. This button was union bred. Mm-hmm. And where I worked with Baird Rustin, I really don't remember how long I worked with him, because of course I was, still very serendipity. But I knew that I fell in love with this man who had this most beautiful voice. And that was the only reason I was there.
If we have to be honest.
Yeah. And he was an intellectual. And whatever he spoke was, very way above average. He was just a dynamic person. And I think he embedded in us that need to be aware that this was special. There was no way that we could anticipate. No, I don't think anyone did.
Did you have an idea of numbers before you got there, what you were thinking? 10,000 would be a lot to you at the time, probably?
Numbers, no.
No. So it must have been.
It was a sea.
Oh, wow.
It was an ocean of people. When we got there, the question was, how are we going to get to the front or to where everything was happening? But amazingly, it was happening everywhere. Because beside the clusters of people doing things, singing and, sharing, we could see everything because Martin Luther King was on a raised platform. And so everything was organized. It was perfect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you remember where you were in position to either the stage or?
Yeah, I think we got to be pretty close because we could see everything. I remember seeing Harry Belafonte closely, and Odetta was there, I think. Odetta was there, Mahalia Jackson, and we saw everyone. But mind you, people were moving. So with the movement, you got a chance to move up or to the right or left.
That's what I read about, that it wasn't like people were just standing in awe and just
No.
listening. There was lots of milling about, coming together with groups of friends, or maybe going and moving.
Yes.
And it was very much a social gathering
Yeah.
as well.
It was. Yeah.
Do you remember the music as much as the speeches, more of the so, or all of it
I
together?
remember how many written on the wind. The answer, my friend, is written on the wind. I remember a lot of it, but I think that when we started singing "We Shall Overcome," I think that was like a hit. It was a hit. It was the beginning of a service, and you know, it's very difficult to explain what happened that day. And I don't think that I could be the arbiter of the event simply because it was so awesome. It had to have been God driven. Mind you, we had this big warning that things were going to happen. Then we got there, and if you've seen those pictures that I brought, every man was dressed in a suit in the heat of August. And ladies were dressed, some in hats, because this was going to church. And I think people were willing to die if it came to that for this special day. And how do we measure that? You can't.
You're not the first person we spoke to today that says there's not really a true way to describe any of it. There's just no way to even put into words.
No, no. I mean, as a young woman, I hung out in the fountain in the Greenwich Village. And you know, everybody would come with their guitars, and you had a lot of fun. And you enjoyed it. But this was a different coming together, because the spiritual aspect of it was so highly, involved, unconsciously. And it just shows you when good people are together with the same value, what you could do. I mean, I think that we could have made ice cream that day.
In August, especially, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So it seems like you have a past of protest or activism, or would you consider yourself a disobedient, or would you was this a spark for you? Was this a cap of the thing for you, or a continuation?
No, we came out at Emmett Till's murder. That's the day we started advocating. But before that, my mother was a unionist, and we were always involved in the union. I was a union baby. They paid for my school, my hospital, my everything. And because of that, lots of meetings were held at our house. I'd be the one to carry the liquids upstairs, sometimes water, sometimes not. But the bottom line is that we were involved in this union activism for many, many years.
Well, I think it's hard to have any kind of argument about any kind of equality without being about the economics have got to come into play. I mean, work for everyone has got to come into play. So I think it's interesting that that's how it evolved, and it becomes bigger, but that's where it has to start sometimes,
Oh yes, oh yes. I think one of the things, the misconceptions we have, is that this thing happened. We made it happen. Every single person present that day made a difference. Without that, I don't think it could have been the same. Because it was my sister, Jean, and myself, and a friend who was Jewish. And the three of us walked together. I mean, we never thought about the racial aspect. That was never a part of our equation. It was about, let's do it.
Did that change after, you think? Do you think it's...
It has changed now, but it didn't for many, many years. We lived on the wings of that event, because I think there was a coming together, and your identity came with that. Were you in the march? Yeah. Where were you? And that made a difference. Even people who weren't there, the ones who were telling us not to go, were now claiming that they were there. I mean, it was...
Why were they telling you not to go?
Oh, there was certainly going to be trouble, and this and that and the other. But you know what? we had been there before, and you know, if you notice, everybody was locked on the march. People were locked together. And that was because the first line of defense would be the first ones to be in trouble if it ever came. But you also held each other up, because that was a very hot day, you know, and I don't think we felt the heat.
Or didn't remember it, because sometimes I think you forget those kind of things.
Absolutely.
Well, what I'm finding also interesting is we've spoken to 3 people today, you're being our 4th, and you are the only female.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, do you feel as a woman, was the experience different? Was there any kind of nervousness about travel? Was there any kind of nothing at all that? Did you feel nothing different? I mean, it was a whole universal feeling overall.
I don't think that I've ever been a woman different from a man. And I don't mean that in any gender expression. I mean that in that I felt that I had as much right to be there as the men. We were equal. And the men who were there to protect us, they did. You know, do you need some water? Are you okay? Are you tired? That was the kind of feeling that you got. And I think that, of course, there were more men than women at the march. But it was a moment for people who were already involved in the civil rights movement, and their families. And I think, like my friend Stokely Carmichael, he lived among the boys. They were the ones who were the freedom fighters. So naturally there'd be more men than women. I think that was the difference.
And now I feel like there's a different culture as far as fame, celebrity, things like that. And I was talking earlier with my associates here, and it seems like this feeling was especially all of one, we're all in this together, much more like I mean, of course we're in awe of Dr. King, we're in awe of the people that spoke, but it was also something like this is our battle together, right? I mean, it wasn't this...
You know what? There were many celebrities in our midst that day. And you'd see like Belafonte walking across, and it didn't matter because the purpose was a unified purpose to create change. And you know, there were little rumors about this and that. I think that Martin Luther King was invited to the White House, he was not invited to the White House, that sort of thing. But you know, I don't think that was our purpose. We were there for celebrity. And plus that in those days, we weren't so conscious of this hero worship of people who were not part of our community. That made a big difference.
That's true, that's true. When you walk the walk with somebody, it's a lot different, you know?
Yes, yes.
You have some questions?
When did you get the realization that this day was more significant than a day? You know, was it as soon as you left? I know you spoke in the beginning about the silence on the train, but when did it fully hit you? Was it a couple months down the road, a couple years down the road?
I was struck then. That was lightning. The problem was after that, how do you carry it forth? And I think that the process came when I moved to Africa.
When was that?
In 1968. When we got to Africa, that was the time many people were coming over. The common denominator was very evident then. Most of the people were part of this. And because of the millions who were on the march in Washington, there was no way you could know how everybody felt. There was only one way to prove it, and that's time. And I think with time, our romance grew more intense. It was a real love affair. And it was a love affair of others, and we were proud that we had taken what was considered a risk then to stand.
How did people react when you came back and that knew you were there? Friends, acquaintances, not friends?
Well, when we got back, one of our neighbors came to meet us at Grand Central. And he's like, I got you some food, I got some water in the car, and some sweet drinks and all that, because none of us really drank. And he was concerned. He had Band-Aids and you know, he was concerned, aspirins, just in case something had happened. They were glued to the radio. And when we lived on a brownstone street in Brooklyn, and the whole neighborhood was out there waiting to hear what had happened.
But there, so you were saying you kind of not represent your neighborhood per se, but not everyone went. Then it wasn't not an honor to go, but was it hard to go? Was it more of a financial hardship to be able to go, or what was it more?
You know what? I don't even remember how much. I don't even know if we paid anything. The union hired the trains, and you were invited. There might have been a charge, but I really don't think there was any money involved. I think they needed the bodies, because don't forget, how do you get people to do this?
Without the internet.
Yeah, there was no internet.
Yeah.
We had the drums. and that was it. You know, a few radio stations picked it up, but generally speaking, it was people power.
And it seems like a very organized effort. We did a lot of research behind it with Philip Randolph and all the people leading up to it, and all the things that they had done to make sure this happened, and it seemed incredibly organized.
Well, I can tell you, mimeographing in those days, we had that machine. That was my job in the union.
Oh.
Working with Bay and Rustin. I mean, what else could I do? Maybe typing a little bit. But there were tons and tons of papers. And I've been looking through the archives trying to see if there's anybody who kept anything. Because other than that newspaper clipping that I got from the union, I haven't found anything. And I was trying to see, but for this thing, it keeps getting lost and it comes back. It just appears out of nowhere, sometimes just to remind me. But I think that the whole effort was massive, but singular.
I understand.
You know, did people have signs in the crowd? I'm trying to picture what it looked like.
Look at that
Right.
picture and you'll see everyone, lots of people had signs.
We spoke to a gentleman earlier, and he said some people have signs for their church or for their
Yes.
neighborhood or for their whatever they were kind of representing, kind of thing.
Yeah, they were all, you know, nothing commercial. And ladies wore hats. They were dressed in Sunday clothes. It was church, I guess, for some of them. You know, there was no battle. The battle was really to come back and tell the story.
At the time, did it seem Dr. King's speech would, I mean, and I hate to concentrate just on it, I love the speech so much, but I know the whole day is a magical day, but did the speech seem...
Well,
No.
I think when Dr. King started, he said, I have a dream. We were all chatting, everybody was moving around. And then apparently, I don't know, because I'm not witnessing this. Then he said it again. And then there was this like, stop. What did I just hear? And then he starts. And then he goes into it. And by that time, everyone was mesmerized. And there were people behind him, and they were like cheering him on. Go on, Dr. King, you speak it, man, you know. And for many of us raised in New York, we had never experienced anything like that. You know, really, I had never experienced. I'm Catholic to the bone. I've never heard a priest talk like that. So it was, for me, a new experience. For most of us, it was a new experience. And it was just the impact, because he was speaking truth. And with truth, you can't argue with it. What are you going to say?
I know, I remember when I read a letter from Birmingham jail, when I read it actually in school, about a perfect oratorial argument. And
That was
really,
it?
you can't argue with it. There's just, okay, he's saying X, Y, and Z, and it's like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me here?
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah.
And it's well done, and there he's it seems to me smart enough to realize that this argument that I'm going to give you is something that's not of passion, it's of logic, it's of truth. It is passionate, it becomes that way, but it comes out of a way that's just what makes sense.
My other great impact was the death of Viola Luisi. I think those two things were just on each other. And, you know, when someone loses a life in the course of the war, they're a hero or shero, whatever. And there were many others who, of course, Goodman, Schreiner, Cheney. Those are the things that really galvanized us, because things kept happening that made us know that there was a purpose. And marching together bonded us. So I think that, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but there is no way to understand the impact of that moment.
I have a question. Sorry. I know you had the March on Washington. Do you think that America has made good on that promise?
No.
From Dr. King?
No. We did for a short time. There was the euphoria after that, the euphoria. We felt good about ourselves. Universities were integrated. We could go to Harvard. We could do all that. But when you left your enclave, you were back in chains. And then, I don't quite know how to put this, but moving to places in the South, there was always fear. And I have 2 sons now, and I'm living in fear again. And so, what changed? When a friend who loves you tells you, oh, you know, the only thing they see is what somebody else did. You know, and my whole thing is that, are there any perfect races or people? No. We all fall short at some time in our lives, and we have to come to terms with that. But no, we have stepped back 50 years right now.
So does it almost feel like a boomerang to you in a sense of like there was progress, and then now you feel like it's moving backward?
Absolutely. And you know what? It's the ugly language. Even in those days, I don't think I heard such ugly language as I'm hearing now. People think that they have the right to say the ugliest things about each other. And it's, you know, you can't paint everybody with one brush. My life was entirely different to most people in my neighborhood, in my community. But that doesn't make me better than somebody else. Because, you know, the kids I grew up with, they've all achieved. Everyone has achieved. But what about our children? You know, we were taught to achieve because we came from a very tight-knit community in New York. And that was it. You gotta have at least one person going to college. When he comes back, he has to teach the others. And also, when you cooked, you shared your meal with the neighbor. But we don't have that sense of unity anymore. And I'm not only talking about blacks, I'm talking about everybody. Because I've eaten my share of knishes and ronzonis and everything.
And Cubans and everything.
Yes, yeah. So, what happened?
We talked out there with other people and how that was a unique day where many people coming together with no agendas. Well, one agenda, a universal agenda. And I think it's tough now. It seems like to get those those types of groups, that much a variety of people, to have just the one agenda of just let's be, freedom, equality, this kind of thing.
Well, I think now we have come to this personal agenda thing. You don't have an agenda that is inclusive. You have an agenda that says, I need this, I need that. This is why I kept saying, I've understood time. I know what time is. I've lived in all kinds of situations and in all kinds of places. And I learned from people who were considered illiterate that to be there on time is most important. But then after that, time is not important. Because you can't go to visit somebody 300 miles away and then say, oh, I gotta leave right now. Or to be asked to leave. You get there and you have to be able to shed everything and become one with that person or that environment.
It sounded like you guys were able to do that August 28th, 63.
We did it then and we continue to do it.
So,
Oh yeah.
good. We're very good. Thank you so much, Althea, for coming.
Thank you. And thank God for it. I never thought I'd see 50 years of anything in my life.
And looking like, well, you probably, when you